I guess it connected with so many people, and like I always presumed we would be kind of like a cult band.
But I played him a song and he played me a song and I was like, yes.
This is the story of a group of pals from Glasgow who formed a band and changed the face of British music.
And he just looked at me wide-eyed and he said, nobody's written a lyric like that in this country in years. And he was absolutely dead right.
And just straight away, it just completely blew my mind, which is not a phrase I use very often.
We were celebrating. There was something to celebrate, like, every day.
A band who started off playing gigs in friends' bedrooms and soon found themselves performing at the Grammys and touring the world to millions.
It just felt like a really exciting time. Like, where the hell is this going to go?
And I remember saying to a friend that, like, you know, that band is going to be as big as the Strokes this time next year, you know, and it kind of came true. They really did.
Like all good stories, it features the highest of highs.
Like Lou Reed walks in. It was just like, it was mental. It was absolutely crazy, yeah.
A few obligatory lows for dramatic effect.
Yeah, I was wondering if you're going to bring that up.
You know, like the legend became that there was a punch up, and yeah, I did want to punch him, to be honest, but I didn't.
And most importantly of all, an iconic soundtrack that is like no other.
Take me out!
It's a story of risk, intuition, and reinvention, told for the first time by the band themselves in exclusive new interviews with a little help from their friends, collaborators, and those they've inspired.
And it was like, what is going on right now? Like, wait, what? How are we gonna get our foot in the door when there's another, you know, seemingly there's this other beast?
And you didn't want them to stop playing because like song after song was an absolute banger, and everybody just wanted to dance.
I suppose there was an element of, you know, what was not to like about this band?
I'm Rose Matafeo, comedian, writer, actor, and Franz Ferdinand mega fan. Here to show my love for the band after I was kicked off their official internet message board as a teenager. But all is forgiven. This is Words So Leisured, the story of Franz Ferdinand. Part 1. Glasgow.
I would start the story in the kitchen of Groucho's St. Jude's, which is a restaurant, or was a restaurant, in Glasgow, where Bob Hardy and I were working in the summer of the year 2000.
This is Alex Kapranis, then a band promoter and local musician in Glasgow, with a number of bands already behind him, including the Corellia, the Amphetamines, and the Yummy Fur.
We would play each other music and talk about the music that we loved in the spare time that you had in the kitchen. Because kitchens are funny places. You have intense periods of activity and then periods of calm. And in those periods of calm, we would play each other music and talk about what we loved about it. Listening to Famous Blue Raincoat by Leonard Cohen and talk about, oh, yes, like it's totally heartbreaking, that line, and do you get the reference of Going Clear, or he would play me 69 love songs, or we would talk about the Harmonies and the Everly Brothers.
Alex got me a job over the summer in the year 2000.
And this is Bob Hardy, then a student at the Glasgow School of Art, and definitely not a musician.
I was washing dishes and he was a chef, and we spent a lot of time together talking about music. And so, yeah, maybe that was sort of the beginning.
The talk kind of turned from what we loved about music to becoming, well, if I was in a band, I would do this, and if I was in a band, I would do that. And then eventually it turned into, when we have a band, it's going to be like this. Or at least it was in my head. I was talking to Bob recently about it, and he had no idea we were going to form a band. But in my head, it just seemed totally obvious.
Maybe if it was a movie, you'd start it there. But musically, perhaps, musically it would have been going around to Alex's flat. In autumn 2001, I was hanging out with Alex, and we'd socialise a lot. And just spend time in his kitchen drinking whiskey mainly. And then, but I'd gone around one day, and he'd had a bass, and he was like, he was playing me some songs he'd been writing, and he said, "Do you fancy playing a bit of bass?" I didn't play an instrument, and I had no desire to play an instrument either, because I tried before and it was hard. and I was at art school, and I had other things going on. You know, I was like, I had painting and stuff. I mean, I knew Alex had been in bands. I think I went to see him playing Amphetamines. You know, you get to the age of 21, and you can feel a bit late to like suddenly pick up a guitar, because you have to do all the embarrassing kind of fumbling around that people do when they're like 12. It just seemed like I'd missed the boat, really. So yeah, it never really crossed my mind that we'd start a band.
Bob would say that I'm not a musician, I can't play bass. And my argument was, well, if you can play some notes on an instrument, then you are a musician. Not necessarily the most accomplished musician in the world, but you are some degree of musician. And I remember there was my pal Mick, who played trumpet in Bell and Sebastian, who I'd been in the Amphetamines with. He gave me a bass one time, and it must have been about 2001, and said, oh, does anybody want this bass? I said, oh, yeah, God, I'll take it. I said, okay, do something useful with it. I remember that was his words, do something useful with it. I took it back to my flat, and I also had a bottle of Lafroig whiskey. So I gave Bob a call and said, look, I got this bottle of Lafroig and a bass. Do you want to come over to the flat? And so I think he was more tempted by the Lafroig than the bass. And we drank the whiskey, and I was like, come on, I'll teach you how to play bass. It's like, I'm not a musician. It's like, come on, like, I'll show you, just put your finger there. And then it's like, right, okay. And so he did it, and then dunk, 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 dunk. And then it's like, yeah, right, okay. Now take that same finger and move it to the other string and just a fret up. No, there you go, just behind the fret. There you go. Now hit the thing again. Dunk, dunk. Okay, right, you keep doing that. I'm going to play this on the guitar. And then it's like, right, there you go. That's you're a musician now. That's a song. That's a song. And it was a song. That was a song. It was the basis of a song that ended up on a first album called This Fire. It's, you know, like, and what he plays live now still is a version of what he played in my kitchen in Denniston that very first day.
As Bob slowly came around to the idea that he could be a musician, he and Alex began looking for others they could form a new band with. What they really needed was a drummer. Enter not the man you might be thinking of, but rather a young German musician who'd recently moved to Glasgow from Munich. He was looking to form a band too, and one night his girlfriend brought him to a fateful party with her friends from the art school. His name is Nick McCarthy.
I just finished studying the double bass at the Conservatoire in Munich, and it was all very, you know, I thought I could teach it or something like that. But in Glasgow, no one gives a flying fuck about the double bass. Yeah, my girlfriend was like, you know, she was trying to be very supportive. So she's going to the art school, and she was just trying, you know, she always tried to take me along to parties and stuff like that, and then one of the parties she said, oh, there's this guy Michael Kasparis going to this party, and he's a really good guitarist, he's a friend of a friend, and maybe he'd like to do something with you, you know, he's interested in German music as well and stuff. And I was like, yeah, okay, go meet him. And that's Wee Michael, who we wrote the song about as well. So I met him, and I did play music with him, and I also met all the other members of the band at that party as well.
The meeting of Alex and Nick had become something of Franz Ferdinand legend, involving a clash of personalities and cultures, alcohol and a fight. Alex Kapranos.
We just arrived, and I put the bottle of vodka down on the kitchen surface, turned around to say something to somebody, and literally turned back, and this litre of vodka that had nothing drunk of it yet was gone. And so I started looking around, kind of like, did somebody pick that up by mistake? And then I look over the other side of the room, and there's this short-arse cunt with my bottle of vodka. And what the fuck is he dressed like as well? He's got one of those kind of like late 80s crusty haircuts, you know, where it's kind of like cut in at the side and long at the back. And the fuck is he doing, man? Like, and oh my god, he's handing out my bottle of vodka to his pals as if it's his. Right? Well, who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you? And then typical Nick style, like looking back on it, it came like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm so terribly sorry. In Germany, I'm from Germany. Where I'm from, we just share everything.
In Glasgow, it seems like alcohol is like gold, really, and everyone's very precious about their own alcohol, and they bring it to parties. And that was another thing that I didn't quite get, because where I come from, just people brought their drinks, and everyone just drunk everything, whatever, And but in Glasgow, everyone brings their own drinks and drinks that, and that's another thing I didn't quite understand. And he was like looking at me and going like, who the fuck is this guy, And I had some like flamboyant thing on as well.
I remember seeing Nick floating around. He was like wearing a kind of like circus leader outfit, maybe.
And he was like, that's actually my bottle of vodka, Nicholas, or whatever you're called. And so that's how we met, a fight, and it was quite intense, actually.
Like the legend became that there was a punch up, and I did want to punch him, to be honest, but I didn't. And I said to him, I don't suppose you're a drummer, are you? And he said, yeah, I'm actually. Yeah, I'm a drummer. I was like, so that's funny. I'm looking for a drummer. I'm just getting a band together with my friend Bob. And so this is where, shortly afterwards, we discover that Nick was not only a thief, but a liar as well, because he cannot play drums to save himself. like he's an amazing musician. Like Nick's like a very, very talented, like the kind of guy that can pick up most instruments and get an incredible melody out of them. He's just a totally gifted natural, but not with drums.
The next day, Alex called me up and said something along the lines of, oh, did you speak to that German guy yesterday at the party? And I was like, oh, briefly. And he was like, oh yeah, he was a bit annoying because he stole my whiskey or whatever. But anyway, I asked him if he played drums, and he said yes, and he seemed quite excited. So we're going to do some music. I was like, oh, okay, that sounds fun.
And so we did. Went around the next day. I remember very well, like ringing his bell on the south side of Glasgow, and I don't think we played any drums at that time. We just kind of like talked about music, and showed each other what we'd been doing, and talked about our ideas, and started playing a bit. And it just felt really natural. It just felt like we'd been doing it for years, like, immediately. Like no awkwardness. It was just like, yeah, this is easy. Like all three of us, Bob, who wasn't really a musician, Nick, who'd gone to the conservatoire in Munich, and me from like Glasgow, whatever. Yeah, it just made sense.
I played him a song, and he played me a song, and I was like, yes. Yeah, and I was like, wow, cool. That sounds a bit like David Bowie. That'll do.
Over the next few months, various friends played with Alex, Bob and Nick, but one would complete the lineup of Franz Ferdinand in 2002. Paul Thompson was a drummer from Edinburgh, formerly of the Oil Stars and the Yummy Fur. He had also become the singer in an electronic punk project called Pro Forma, which had given him a new love for being at the front of the stage.
So I joined and I said, I don't want to play drums, I want to play guitar, even though I can really play the guitar. I mean, I not bad, but not brilliant either. But with a view to improving. And Nick was playing drums, and he's like not the greatest drummer in the world either. But I mean, he was playing stand-up drums like Bobby Gillespie or like Mo Tucker. He had the kick drum set on its side.
And Paul's guitar playing, I mean, I've got to say it was at the best on a par with Nick's drumming. Maybe not quite as good. So it was kind of fun. It was like a fun band. Like it felt, chaotic and just daft, and four friends having a laugh and just hanging out, and lots of ideas, very little competence. Like just bit shy, you know, like just, but a good laugh, and like ideas flying everywhere and stuff coming out right really, really quickly, and just having a laugh. Bob went out to the off license, and when he was out, I was kind of like, I sort of said to Nick and Paul, I said, well, you know, Paul, you know how you're an amazing drummer, right? And Nick, you know how you can play stringed instruments really, really easily. Like, why don't we try a song where, where you maybe swap positions? Like, just, hey, it might work. It might work. And it did. It really worked.
As I was walking back up the steps, I could just hear this band playing, and it was like, fuck it, that sounds like a real band. And like Paul had jumped on the kit and was like just playing this like disco beat, and it just all coalesced. It was like, oh fuck, this is a band. It's like, this is really good. It's just like, it actually, you know, like, you know, fall to the floor and kind of like, just, but I didn't, you know, I'd seen him drum before in other bands, but he just brought it all together. I was like, okay, this is what I wanted to be in a band that sounded like, you know.
That's the time I heard the band for the first time, the band properly. Because Paul is an amazing drummer, like yeah, he's astonishing, and Nick's, you know, really easy on it, had a style of his own, I had my thing, and then Bob's attitude, and amongst it all, it's like, fuck, this sounds like something I've not heard before, and it sounds really, really good.
I'm Celia Hampton, and Franz Ferdinand played their first show in my bedroom in Glasgow.
It was May 15th, 2002, and although the band didn't have a name yet, Celia Hampton, a friend and classmate of Bob Hardy's, invited the group to play at an art show she and her friends were hosting at their shared flat. It was called Girl Art, and Alex, Bob, Nick and Paul were to be the event's very own boy band.
So they were in my bedroom, and the art show was in my friend Joe's bedroom, which was next door. And those big tenement rooms obviously have quite high ceilings. They were playing with their back to the windows, and then a few rows of people just sitting down, and then a couple of rows of people kind of, I guess it was about 20 or 30 people looking in.
Some kind of football match was on. I can't remember who was playing. Paul will know. I think it was like a European Cup something or other. Alex was quite nervous, I could tell, because he was like chain smoking, and we just walked around the block, and yeah, I was absolutely terrified. Like, I was shaking, you know. I had to lean against the wall because I was like, fuck, I had to, because I'd learned patterns to play, which is you know how I understand music. If I lost my way at any point, I was screwed. So it was like I couldn't get back into the song, so I had to really, you know, kind of really concentrate and not get lost. So I was probably just like absolutely, you know, like just, you know, not performing at all, just kind of barely getting by. You know, I was totally like, felt like a fraud, because like I think most of them knew that I wasn't really a bass player as well, so it was obvious, you know, I was just like the guy from art school who was like filling in on bass.
The Champions League final was at Hampden that day, because it was Leverkusen and Real Madrid. Yeah, so that was going on. So there was kind of lots of people from kind of outside of the city in town at that point, and it was like kind of good atmosphere. But yeah, we played 4 songs. We played Jacqueline, Tell Her Tonight, Michael, I think, and a sort of early version of Matinee, I think, if memory serves me. But then more people had showed up sort of halfway through the show, so we just played the first 2 songs again.
My main memories of that gig and of other gigs that they did were of the sort of party vibe of it just being a really great time to dance and have fun, and you didn't want them to stop playing because like song after song was an absolute banger, and everybody just wanted to dance. They just sounded amazing live, like from straight away.
I remember seeing Franz Ferdinand play really early. Maybe it was that house party, or maybe it was at Stereo. And I remember being so blown away. All the songs were stuck in my head the next day.
Scott Patterson from fellow Glasgow band Sons and Daughters.
I hadn't seen anything like that, you know. And I remember saying to a friend that, like, you know, that band is going to be as big as the Strokes this time next year, you know. And it kind of came true. They really did.
Immediately, we just noticed that people were reacting to it, like, almost immediately. And, you know, I'd been in bands previously and played to, like, 3 people in a room, 3 sort of disinterested people, so this definitely felt like a bit different. Like, people were having like a sort of very spontaneous reaction to it, you know, even like dancing, which I'd never really encountered before.
And word started going around just in Glasgow, and people kind of twigged that there was something happening there. Something began to happen. As we wrote more songs and played more, it just became more and more special. It was very exciting, actually. Yeah, to be in amongst that and like feeling it happen. It's like, oh shit, there's something pretty cool here.
Celia Hempton remembers the DIY ethos of Glasgow's art and music scene, a scene that was inspiring the band now known as Franz Ferdinand.
I don't want to over-romanticise it, but it was sort of quite pure in the sense of like this idea of creating. It was very much about making art or music that you really believed in and thought was great, and it wasn't about a kind of, it didn't feel, to me at least, about a contrived trajectory towards success in that way. And Alex and Nick would often say things like, "Oh, do you want to do this? Why don't you be in a band? Why don't let's you play drums? And you haven't played this instrument before. Why not just give it a go and let's just make this happen?" And so that each party would always have a band. You'd never just go to a party and it would be a DJ. There would always be a band, even if they'd only just been a band for a week. And even if it was a failure, it would still be fun.
Glasgow is such a kind of, I don't know, it's just like such a kind of inclusive like environment. You just kind of meet people.
Musician Roxanne Clifford was then a photography student at the art school, the centre of the city's creative world.
Just people would have lots of parties on the weekends and stuff, and there'd be lots of gigs, art openings, things like that. People would do stuff in their flat because there's really big, nice flats in Glasgow for parties. People just had very sort of unpretentious, this kind of like, sort of this like kind of DIY drive. Like, I don't feel like anybody was trying to make it per se, but it just felt very kind of genuine.
The band began to play as many shows as possible, particularly in unconventional venues. It led them to searching for their own creative base, where they could practice and host parties and DIY art shows of their own. Wanting to make use of the wealth of disused warehouses that Glasgow had to offer, Alex and Nick went looking for a vacant building. Alex again.
I'd gone over to Berlin in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it'd blown my mind the way Berlin was at that time, because at that time there was still a lot of empty buildings that would semi-derelict, which people would just take over and turn into an art space or turn into a venue or a club. And it was just so kind of relaxed and lackadaisical, but like with such a positivity and enthusiasm and a cool. And it's like, wow, this is incredible. There's nothing like this in Glasgow. I never see anything like this. And then I remember walking around Glasgow after that and just seeing the city from a completely different perspective, and just seeing all these empty buildings that there were in Glasgow, and kind of like, why isn't this happening here? Why isn't this happening here? I remember that first night at the party, that was a big thing that Nick and I talked about, because he'd seen that in Munich, where he was from. And that was one of the big things that we talked about. Let's make this happen in Glasgow. Let's do that in Glasgow.
The thing about Glasgow is just that there was so much empty space there as well, and it was just so beautiful to go into all this old industrial stuff, and it was just an absolute dream, you know. Like now, I suppose it's all, I don't know if it's all gone in Glasgow, but like it was all still empty. It was so much of it, you know. There's so much empty industrial space, and we were like, brilliant.
And we saw this building this kind of tower of collapsing ruin, and we sort of went up, and we got talking to this guy who was hanging outside having a fag, and he was saying, "Oh, what do you do here?" And I said, like, "Oh, we've got a glassworks here on the first floor." And he said, "Oh, what are you doing?" So, "Oh, we're looking for a place we can put on gigs and stuff." He's like, "Oh man." I said, "Have you ever seen upstairs in here?" And we're like, no, what's that?
This place was just absolutely stunning. It was like seven flights up, and we were like, "Can we rent it?" I don't know. We just walked in, and then we asked around, and we found the owner, and he was like, "Yeah, you can have it, whatever." So, and it was absolutely brilliant.
It was a total state. It was a total state. Like, most of the windows were smashed. It was covered in pigeon shit. That's the thing I remember most than anything. Like, just pigeon shit everywhere. This really noxious dust. All the windows panned in, and it was beautiful. It was perfect.
Franz Ferdinand's beautiful, new, disgusting home needed a name. They called it the Chateau. Nick McCarthy.
We called it Chateau because it was like kind of this glass construction on top of another building. I mean, it was not, kind of penthouse really, because it was all glass all the way around, but like totally fucked up. You could go on the roof as well, and you got this amazing view over Glasgow in all directions, and and that's why we called it the Chateau, because we were like the kings of the castle, and it was just a dream really, and it was just south of the river. It was a pretty rough area, but it was, we could just bolt the door and just let in people we wanted to, and we just had like loads of illegal pies there, and we always played, and we always got like our friends to play as well, sons and daughters and the likes.
It was honestly kind of a death trap, but there would be these like illegal kind of gigs put on. I think somehow maybe Alex had a friend that knew how to hook up the electricity, and so you could like get amps plugged in, and you weren't allowed to sell beer obviously because it wasn't licensed, so you'd get around that by like having a lottery ticket system where you'd buy a lottery ticket and win, inverted commas, win a beer, And the gig was really fun, but really freezing cold. I remember being playing the guitar and singing, and having like that kind of cold breath air, just seeing your breath in the air in front of you, and like barely, your fingers were so cold you could barely play guitar. Also, the carpet that we were playing on was wet, so wet carpet plus like amps and microphones. It's I kind of wonder we didn't all die, honestly.
Drummer Paul Thompson.
There was a wooden floor. It looked like the floor was going to cave in at one point. And I remember being sort of quite nervous that something like that was going to happen. So there was this kind of edge to the proceedings.
I remember the first gig we played on there. It felt really exciting. It was all completely word of mouth, like just telling people, tell your pal. There's this thing happening, and so we set up a stage, and we didn't really have any lighting. So I don't know what we're going to do about lighting. And then we found in the basement of this building, there'd obviously been some company that had been selling sunbeds at some point. I'm like, man, look at these things. Come on, let's pull them upstairs. So we pulled them up the 6 flights of stairs up to the top. And we set them up on their ends, like sort of like long ways, like kind of going up and down behind the stage. And found that like when you like wired them up to like a 4-gang plugged into a 4-way into the wall, and we found that like if you flick the switch on and off, like the lights would come on randomly, like and just flicker, and it looked like this like beautiful light show, like kind of like really stark and dramatic. And so like, and then I kind of thought, with that in the background and us in the foreground as silhouettes, and so that became our light show. And so that's how we played the first gig. It was like us on these crates with that in the background, and some friends of ours showing their art. And I remember Paul, because he was closest to the lights because he was a drummer at the back. He did get a suntan, like he burned his neck at that first gig.
There was definitely a kind of slow but gradual trajectory at that point, and then I think after we met CERN, it kind of picked up pace quite quickly.
My name's Cern Canning. I've managed Franz Ferdinand since 2003. The first time I heard of Franz Ferdinand was in the end of 2002. I was managing a band called The Beatings, who were a rock and roll band from London and were being produced by Kevin Shields of My Bloody Valentine. And they were doing pretty well. The NME liked them. They were getting quite a lot of interest around the time of the White Stripes and the Von Bondis. It was sort of primal rock and roll. And they kept talking about these friends of theirs in Scotland. And at first, I don't even think a name was mentioned. Then after a while, they said, well, next time we do Glasgow, can this band Franz Ferdinand support us? And I said, I've never heard of them. And this went on for a while. And they probably, in this period, probably went up to Scotland a couple of times. And the last time I remember them, I said, well, what shows have they done? They said, well, they've only played in girls' bedrooms and art school gigs. And I said, well, they're not going to mean any tickets, so that's not going to be much good to you. So this went round and round. In the end, Todd, the drummer from The Beatings, who actually now, funnily enough, is on the crew of Franz Ferdinand, but Todd in those days got a bit bored asking me and left a CD on my desk. And I came into work the next day and there was a CD with an amazing cover. It was two guys who looked like an early sort of New Order or A Certain Ratio picture, black and white, great haircuts, lots of attitude, but very natural. I think it was actually taken at a party in Glasgow in 2002. And that was the cover with this sort of slightly gothic script, Franz Ferdinand on the front, and 2 tracks on the CD. And luckily, I didn't put it in a drawer. Luckily, I listened to it that afternoon or that morning. And it was Darts of Pleasure and Tell Her Tonight were the 2 tracks, I think, which were the first ever demo. And just straight away, it just completely blew my mind, which is not a phrase I use very often, but I just absolutely loved it. And I remember thinking it was a bit sparksy, a bit roxy, but just really fresh was the word that, funny enough, kept coming up when I played it to people. It just sounded very different. And it was sort of counterintuitive to what else was around at the time. Everything was a bit grungy and noisy. And even though I loved the White Stripes, I thought they were fantastic. But this came along and sounded from a different planet.
And then Cern got in touch with me. It was like, oh yeah, I'd really like to see the I'd like to meet up with you. So I met up with him somewhere in Shoreditch, and I just sort of looked upon him as just like, oh, some London music industry guy, and sort of full of shit or whatever. And he was like, yeah, I really see this being on a level with like Pulp with the Stone Roses or something like that. And I was just like, I was kind of trying to suppress my laughter because I just thought this guy is an absolute chancer. And obviously reported back to the band as well, and they just like, we kind of laughed it off. And then I think Alex was like, wait a minute, maybe there's something in this. So
Cern came up to see us, and we played it, went to a rehearsal room, and it was such a bizarre thing. I remember him like pulling a chair into the middle of the room, and we sat at the other end of the room and played to him. Something like, it's like some weird trial or something like that.
He had a notebook out, and we were like, what's going on here? Whereas like playing in front of like thousands of people is sort of remarkably easy in comparison. It was absolutely terrifying.
You have this kind of thing in your head that's running parallel, because you kind of think, the band's good, it's exciting, you're excited about it, the gigs are great fun, the ideas feel novel, it feels like something exciting is happening. But at the same time, you presume that nothing's going to happen. You presume that you'll play to your pals, and that you might put out a single that is printed in the Czech Republic, and you do 500 copies, of which you sell 50, and the rest of the other 450 sit underneath your bed. The band breaks up, and then 40 years later you die, and it's completely forgotten. That's what I presumed would happen with the band, because that's what happened with every band I knew or had any connection with. That was the route that it took. So part of your mind is thinking that, part of your mind is thinking, but this is the greatest band ever, we're going to have a huge impact on the world. But no, that's not what happens with bands. Anyway, so I thought, yeah, soon let's get a manager.
It just felt exciting. I remember being at art school and Paul, he'd called, Cern had maybe called or texted Paul and said that he'd gone around to Rough Trade that day and like played him the demo and they thought it was good. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. I texted Alex, who was working, I think, at the college at the time. And I was in my studio and I texted him, oh, Paul said this about that. And he's like, that's amazing. We have to go to the pub and celebrate. So basically it was every night was just celebrating something. It was just, there was a lot of drinking going on and partying. And so it just felt like a really exciting time. Like, where the hell is this going to go? It's so exciting.
We were having like just lots of record labels wanting to meet us. We would take the sleeper train down to London and then, like meet like 4 labels in a day, which was crazy because I didn't think that sort of thing happened anymore. It certainly doesn't happen these days from what I can gather. Label feeding frenzies.
Just 12 months after completing their lineup, Franz Ferdinand were in the middle of a record label scrum, with A&R scouts either coming to their occasional shows in London or, more often than not, making the long journey north to Glasgow. The band were excited, but remained wary of these people who were suddenly taking such an interest.
So all these A&R guys started coming up, and we were really wary of these characters, distrustful, suspicious, didn't like them. Like, we wouldn't let them buy us drinks. I remember this was a big thing. Like, they're not going to buy us with a poxy pints of lager like that. We'll buy them a drink. And then we'll hear what they've got to say about the band and what they think about the band's ideas, and that's what really mattered to us. I remember some guy coming up and talking about how he'd signed this very, very popular bland band, and he seemed to have a terrible cold because he kept on disappearing to the toilet and coming back with this very runny nose, and he was full of it. Full of that. And we didn't like these guys. We didn't like that side of the industry. But Lawrence, we did like Lawrence. Like, Lawrence was great.
That Lawrence is Lawrence Bell, the owner and founder of Domino Records, an established yet modest independent record label that was already home to artists including Elliott Smith, Sebado, Pavement and The Pastels. Here is Lawrence Bell.
I think I felt almost immediately that this is the band I've been waiting for, all my life really to sign, and the band that Domino had been waiting to meet, and I think I'd just been waiting for somebody that had the potential, that we could sign, a British band that we could sign for the world that had the potential and that we could help realize the vision and take it around the world. And it wasn't an easy time to be an independent label. It's never easy. And, I think I'd just so desperately keen to find something to really just put everything behind. Always had so much energy at the label and, lots of, great records. We brought a lot of American music into the UK, but we were always trying to find more British music that we could take back out. And this just felt like the one. This is like the dream band to go and just sort of bet the house on, so to speak.
Lawrence, he risked everything on our first album. He took a big chance with us because, like, Domino had been a great label, but on quite a small level. But I know he put himself into considerable personal debt to make sure that they signed us in a way that they could record an album, and the major labels wouldn't get us, and that was great. Because we didn't want to sign with a major label. We wanted to sign with Lawrence. And he did that to send us into the studio and to record. He totally transformed the life of the band and the life of his label. I felt all of us were reckless risk takers. We didn't care about the danger of our actions because our instincts were telling us that something was good, and Lawrence had that recklessness about him. But it's not just it's not the kind of recklessness of self-destruction. Like, it's a recklessness that lets you follow a path to something that's more exciting than an ordinary life.
Next time on Words So Leisured.
I mean, almost like recording an album was the end goal.
We go inside the making of one of the all-time great debut albums, a record that came with its challenges.
A very gifted, really talented guy in the studio, and he's also a really difficult motherfucker.
We were all a bit like, who does this guy think he is?
And the band release a song that will come to define an entire era of British music.
Like, I guess it connected with so many people, and so many people I didn't really expect it to connect with. Like, I always presumed we would be kind of like a cult band.
As Franz Ferdinand are rapidly catapulted from Glasgow art band to global superstars.
Like Bowie started coming down to gigs in New York and stuff, and it's like, what's going on?
They just got pulled into the mainstream, and I suppose there was an element of, what was not to like about this band.
I'm Rose Matafeo, and this has been part 1 of Words So Leisured, the story of Franz Ferdinand. The series producers are Stuart Stubbs and Greg Cochran. This has been a New Allotment production.